So, you think you know the myths about the titan Kronos? How about the one where a god castrates his own father with a sickle, spends years devouring his newborn children whole, and is eventually forced to puke them back up fully grown, alive and drenched in his stomach bile? This is the real story of the titans they never taught you in school, and after this, you'll never look at the myths the same way again. Torn limb from limb by his own sons, you thought the drama stopped there. Ha! We're just getting warmed up. Buckle up, because we're about to dive into a family drama so twisted it makes your Thanksgiving dinner squabbles look like a goddamn tea party. So, you've got Daddy Uranus, the sky god, a total control freak and cosmic abuser. And you've got Mama Gaia, Mother Earth herself, who he's endlessly knocking up, and to put it mildly, she was sick to death of it. Her children, the Titans, were trapped in her womb, stewing in darkness and cramped quarters, all because Daddy was terrified they'd boot him off the throne. Sound familiar? But Gaia was no damsel in distress. Oh no? They don't tell you this part in the pretty storybooks. Gaia was the ultimate puppet master. One night, as Uranus decided to loom over her with his entire starry bulk, she set her plan in motion. Picture this. 4 of her eldest sons, the titans she'd finally unleashed, take their positions at the 4 corners of the world. They grab their old man by his arms and legs and stretch him over the earth like a worn-out waistband. He can't move, the sky itself, pinned to the earth by his own kids. And now for the cherry on this bloody Sunday. Out of the shadows steps the youngest, the most audacious and ambitious of them all, Kronos, and in his hand isn't some little knife. No, sir, in his hand is a sickle of pure adamant, forged by Gaia herself in the fires of her molten core. A weapon made of pure, unadulterated hatred and revenge. Kronos approaches his father. Can you imagine that look? The father, helpless, humiliated, crucified in his own world. And the son, his eyes swimming with a cocktail of fear and naked ambition. One swing, a sickening crack that must have echoed through the newborn cosmos. And a geyser, not of champagne, folks, a geyser of divine blood and seed that sprayed across creation. And just like that, in one monstrous moment, the sky was forever separated from the earth. They weren't divided by space or a great void. They were torn apart by fear, pain, and the most gruesome act of betrayal in history. Uranus, writhing in agony, didn't just scream. He howled. A shriek not just of physical agony, but of total cosmic humiliation. Castrated by his own son, in front of his own wife, who orchestrated the whole damn thing. The blood that dripped from the sickle onto the earth, onto Gaia, gave birth to the terrifying giants and the Furies, the goddesses of vengeance. And as for what Kronos hurled deep into the sea, oh, we'll get to that. Because from that sea foam rose someone whose name you definitely know. But wait, there's more. You think Kronos became a noble ruler. You think he freed his brothers and brought peace and order. Yeah, right? As he wiped his father's blood from his face, he had no idea that karma is a bitch, and she was already breathing down his neck. Because the cycle of violence was just getting started. He devoured his own children to keep the throne still buckled up. Because if you thought castrating your own dad with a sickle was rock bottom, you ain't seen nothing yet. We haven't even started digging. We've just picked up the rusty shovel. So, here's our newly minted king, Kronos, covered in gore, a crown on his head, looking out at the world and thinking, I've won. But fear, you see, is a parasite that burrows under your skin deeper than any disease. As his father, Uranus, lay bleeding out, he croaked out a prophecy. Or maybe it was his mother Gaia, already tired of this bloody circus. Who the hell cares? The point is, they don't tell you this part in the sweet little bedtime stories. The spoiler was simple and terrifying. Your own son will do to you what you did to your father, and that was it. Something inside Kronos just broke. He snapped. Every time his wife, the beautiful Rhea, came to him with a swelling belly, he started having flashbacks. He didn't see a future heir. He saw an executioner with a sickle. He didn't smell his wife. He smelled his own blood and humiliation. The paranoia began to eat him from the inside out, so he decided ... to eat back, in the most literal, nauseating way possible. The first daughter is born, Hestia. Rhea, exhausted from labor, has barely had a chance to hold the baby to her breast when Kronos bursts in, wearing the face of an IRS agent who's just found your offshore account. He silently walks over, takes the tiny, wailing bundle from the midwife's hands. Rhea thinks, oh, he's going to look at her, be moved, feel a father's love. Not a chance. He pries open his maw and, trust me, a Titan's maw is not small and just. Swallows her, whole, like a Tylenol, gulp, and silence. Can you picture it? Rhea, covered in blood and sweat and tears, just staring, jaw on the floor. A moment ago, life was in her arms. Now her firstborn is just a lump in her husband's gut. And he's standing there, licking his lips and saying something like, problem solved. And this, the son of a bitch, became a tradition. A family dinner in hell. Demeter is born gulp, down the hatch. Here a gulp, same place. Hades, the future lord of the underworld, found himself in the underworld of his father's stomach. Poseidon, destined to rule the seas, began his journey in a sea of gastric juices 5 times. 5 times Rhea went through the hell of childbirth, only to watch her husband devour the fruits of her labor. She pleaded, she wept, she became hysterical. He didn't give a damn. The throne was more important. Fear was stronger than love, but on the 6th time ... something in her broke. Or maybe something in her finally forged itself into a fist of steel. As she carried Zeus in her womb, she knew he wasn't getting this one. Enough was enough. She gives birth in secret, on the island of Crete, and then comes a plan, brilliant in its simplicity and audacity. She grabs a rock, a goddamn boulder, roughly the size of a newborn. She wraps it in swaddling clothes, still warm and, forgive me, a little soiled from the birth for authenticity. And she brings it to the gourmand. Kronos, blinded by his paranoia and used to the ritual, doesn't even look. He asks so confident in his power and in his wife's fear that he just snatches the bundle and, without unwrapping it, sends it down the familiar path. Gulp. He probably noticed this baby was a bit on the heavy side, but chalked it up to good nutrition. Father of the year, folks, and now for the final picture. Kronos is sitting on his throne, patting his belly, satisfied. He thinks he's secured his future, but what's really going on? Inside him, in that churning, acid-filled prison, are 5 now maturing gods. 5 bundles of rage who have spent years listening to the gurgle of their father's intestines, waiting for their moment. They didn't die in there. They're gods. They were just marinating. And now a rock has just landed at the bottom of his stomach with a dull thud, an anchor, a symbol of deceit. Kronos' stomach was no longer a digestive organ. It had become the first and most horrific prison in history. A 5-bedroom apartment from hell where your roommates are your siblings and your landlord is your cannibalistic father. Kronos thought he'd swallowed his last problem. In reality, he'd just swallowed the detonator. And somewhere far away, on the island of Crete, watched over by nymphs, the one who would push the button was already screaming his lungs out and growing stronger by the day. The cycle was ready for another, even bloodier, spin. Motherhood was a living hell for her, yes, the cycle was ready for another spin. But let's rewind for a second, because that detonator, the one screaming on Crete, had someone who planted the charge. His mother, Rhea. And this is the part they definitely don't tell you in the sanitized kids' myths. To them, Rhea is just a grieving mother figure, a tragic painting in a gallery. But the reality, folks, motherhood for her was a living, concentrated hell. Don't think about it in the abstract. Picture it right now. You carry a child for 9 months. You feel it kick. You already love it so much your knees go weak. Then comes labor. The pain, the blood, the screaming, the first wave of relief. And there he is, your baby, warm and alive and smelling of milk. And then your husband walks in. Your beloved husband, king of the universe, Kronos. He smiles. He takes your child and shoves it down his own throat, and you hear it. That wet, repulsive crunch of tiny bones, and then he burps, wipes his mouth, and says something like, "So, darling, when's the next one due?" 5 times. That happened 5 times. Hestia, Demeter, Hera, Hades, Poseidon, one after another. A conveyor belt producing daddy's dinner. Can you even begin to imagine her level of despair? This isn't just grief. It's humiliation mixed with terror and postpartum psychosis. Every single time, it was the same story. The smell of milk and blood, a brief infant cry, and then silence, broken only by the satisfied belch of your husband. At some point, something in Rhea's mind just snapped. No more. This gastronomic terror had to end. And she did what all desperate women in her family do. She started plotting. And who did she go to? Her parents. That's right, to the very same Gaia whose children her husband had once shoved back into the womb. And to Uranus, whom that same husband, her son, had castrated and overthrown. The Addams family looks like a book club compared to these freaks. And so this trio, the humiliated mother, the castrated father, and the daughter whose children were being eaten by their own grandson, they cooked up a plan. A plan as simple as a rock and just as effective. When Rhea got pregnant for the 6th time, she wasn't crying. She was preparing. After giving birth to Zeus, while Kronos was off finishing his divine breakfast, she immediately handed the infant to loyal servants. And she herself, she picked up a stone, a cold, dead, ordinary stone. She wrapped it in baby blankets, splashed some gunk on it for a realistic smell, clutched it to her chest in a performance of cosmic grief, and dragged it to her husband. And Kronos, he's a god, a king, the alpha male of the universe. He was used to the ritual. He wasn't looking at a wife anymore. He was looking at a broken baby-making machine. What was he supposed to unwrap every single bundle? He just took the swaddled thing, tossed it into his maw like he'd done so many times before, and swallowed. I bet he didn't even notice that this particular baby scratched the roof of his mouth on the way down. And right then and there, folks, everything changed. Rhea stood watching her husband, who'd just swallowed a rock, and for what was probably the first time in centuries, she didn't feel terror. She felt triumph, a cold, ringing triumph. She hadn't just saved her son, she'd signed her husband's death warrant. The death warrant for her generation, for the entire world order of the Titans. Her own private, hard-won despair had just become the match that lit the fuse on a powder keg the size of the universe. And now, with the detonator tucked away safely on Crete, ticking away under the watchful eyes of nymphs and the goat Amalthea, the big question is, when's it gonna blow? Oh, soon, very soon, and the splashback will hit everyone. Their children weren't people. They were nightmares, so you buckled up, ready for the splashback. Just don't think I'm about to talk about blood and guts splattered all over Olympus. It's all much more insidious, because the real splashback from this titanic explosion, it's their children and their grandchildren. The legacy they left behind. And believe me, this generation wasn't just troubled. Their children weren't people. They were nightmares crawled straight out of the darkest corners of the subconscious. This is the stuff they leave out of the textbooks, where the Titans are just some big guys who got overthrown by the Olympians. The truth is, their legacy poisoned the world for millennia. Take, for example, the son of the Titan Iapetus, Atlas. Heard of him? The guy who holds up the sky. Sounds so poetic, doesn't it? Now, imagine it. Picture the weight of the heavens. Not as a metaphor, as a real, unending heaviness crushing your shoulders, every muscle screaming in agony, bones grinding and aching, sweat mixed with grime and blood carving channels down your back, eating away at your skin. And not for an hour, not for a day, forever. You stare forward but see only emptiness. You want to scream, but all you can manage is a rasp. This isn't just a punishment. It's a living, breathing, suffering monument to what happens when the new regime decides to grind you into dust. Endless, dull, aching humiliation. That's the legacy of the Titans. But wait, there's more. There were those who didn't get caught in the direct line of fire. The Titan granddaughter, Hecate. Oh yeah, this lady deserves her own chapter. She wasn't chained to a rock or thrown into Tartarus. Nope, she became a goddess. But a goddess of what? Witchcraft, necromancy, dark magic. She is the mistress of everything that makes the hair on the back of your neck stand up. The midnight crossroads where terrible deals are made. The whispers of the dead, the shadows that slide behind you in the moonlight. She isn't pure evil. She's something older, more primal. A power born from the chaos and pain of her fallen ancestors. And Zeus, the clever bastard, didn't touch her. Why would he? Power like that always comes in handy. And how about this one? The Titaness Themis, who jumped ship to the Olympian side. She even had kids with Zeus himself, but you know what? Not children. Not warm, screaming bundles of life. She gave birth to abstractions. Concepts as cold as a guillotine's blade. Fate, justice, peace. You think that's a good thing? Just think about it. Your mother gives birth not to a little sister, but to your sentence, your fate, which can never be changed. She births justice blind, unfeeling, ready to pulverize you for the sake of balance. She births peace, but at what cost? At the cost of the war that came before it. Children as functions, children as cogs in a machine. No love, just the cold calculus of the new world order. And the cherry on top of this rotten cake, the Titan Kronos, who was also hurled into the abyss, had grandchildren. You definitely know their names, even if you never knew whose blood ran in their veins. Power and violence. That's right, the one and only Kronos and his sister Gaia, they became Zeus's personal attack dogs. His enforcers. When Prometheus needed to be chained to a rock, who did he send? Them. These two aren't individuals, they are functions. The living embodiment of the brute force and cruelty inherited from their Titan grandfather, but now in service of the new management. So when we talk about the splashback from that powder keg, this is what we mean. The world didn't get cleaner. It was filled with living monuments of pain, goddesses of the dark arts, soulless laws, and brutal enforcers. The old world fell, but its toxic seeds sprouted in the new one. Think that's rock bottom. Oh no, we haven't even started digging yet. Their punishment was worse than death. Alright, got your shovels, because we're digging right down to the rotten core of this little world. And first, we're digging right under Daddy Zeus's throne. The textbooks tell you a pretty story. The valiant Zeus freed his brothers and sisters. Yeah, freed them. You know what that really looked like? He didn't wave a magic wand. He forced his father, Kronos, to vomit them up. All of them, one by one. Just for a second, picture that scene. Not as a heroic epic, but as a disgusting, physiological spectacle. A deep, gurgling sound from the gut of the Titan who devoured his own children. And then comes the first wave. Out plops not an infant, but a fully grown, completely formed god, covered in slime, stomach acid, and half-digested ambrosia. The stench is so bad it makes your eyes water. And behind him, another, and another, and another. Hera, Demeter, Hades, Poseidon, Hestia. Their birth wasn't a miracle, it was an act of humiliating expulsion. They didn't enter the world with a cry, but with the taste of their father's bile in their mouths. That's how the reign of the new gods began, with vomit. Remember that. You think after a family reunion like that, they all sat down for tea? Not a chance. What followed was a universe-spanning throwdown. A war that lasted 10 goddamn years. Can you even wrap your head around that? 10 years isn't soldiers sitting in trenches. It's gods chucking mountains at each other. It's Zeus's lightning burning the sky itself, while the earth cracks under the footfalls of the Titans. 10 years of non-stop, deafening chaos that shook the entire cosmos. Not a second of silence, not a moment of peace. Just primal rage, hatred, and destruction. And then, finally, the Titans lost, the new gods won. And what did these enlightened Olympians do to their aunts and uncles? Kill them. Oh no, that would have been too merciful. Death would have been a gift, a release. Their punishment was worse. They were thrown into Tartarus, and don't confuse Tartarus with Hades, where the souls of mortals go. Tartarus is the basement of the underworld, the deepest, darkest, most hopeless pit in all of creation. A place so remote that if you dropped a bronze anvil from the Earth's surface, it would fall for 9 days and nights, and then it would fall for another 9 days and nights from the floor of Hades to the bottom of Tartarus. Now imagine it. You are an immortal, powerful being, and you are locked in there forever, in a darkness so thick you feel like you could touch it. In a silence so profound that after a couple of centuries, it drives you insane. In a cold that seeps not just into your bones, but into the very essence of your immortal self. Around you are only others like you, broken and driven mad by eternity. Day after day, century after century, millennium after millennium, nothing. You just exist in an agony of oblivion. This isn't just a prison. It's sensory deprivation taken to its absolute extreme. It is psychological torture designed to last forever. They don't tell you that in the pretty myths. In those, the bad guys are simply punished. But I'm telling you, the new gods began their reign with an act of unimaginable, sadistic cruelty that was built to last for all time. But wait, there's more. One of the Titan brothers escaped this fate, Uranus. You think he was some kind of special good guy? No, he was the smartest. He just sold out his own kind. He saw which way the wind was blowing, and, while his own brothers were being cast into the abyss for eternal torment, he quietly sat on the sidelines. He kept his position, his waters, his power. So there you have it, a new world order built on vomit, betrayal, and eternal torture. Sounds like a great start, doesn't it? But this is just the foundation. Next, they start building the walls. And believe me, this new world is going to get a lot filthier. And that's how the world of the Olympians was built, on vomit, betrayal, and eternal agony. Dirty, bloody, and unvarnished, just the way we like it. If you want to keep peeling back the rotten layers of myths and history, the stuff that would have made you sick in school, you know the drill. Smash that like button and subscribe so you don't miss the next deep dive. And in the comments, I want your suggestions. What other divine tyrant, forgotten monster, or psychotic family from ancient legend do you want to hear about? Whose pretty little fairy tale should we get next? Dig deeper.